Magandang Araw, Pilipinas. Imagine this. A country where family ties are everything and faith is like, well, the compass of life. Can a mother's fear, like real deep fear, lead to something so awful? And what happens when, like, the chismes of a community become the actual evidence in a courtroom? Today, we're going deep into a Supreme Court case right here from Negros Oriental that really, like, shook the nation. It's about a pregnancy kept secret, a hidden birth, and a tiny life lost in the waters of Arab Creek. It's heavy stuff, guys.
It makes you think, right? Even when there's no obvious, like, gotcha evidence, the law still has to make sense of these tough human stories. They have to, like, put together pieces of the truth to reach a decision. This case, the people of the Philippines versus Giralyn P. Adalia, shows us just how powerful circumstantial evidence can be. It can actually lead to a conviction in the highest court, the Supreme Court.
Whoa, okay, so let's unpack this case. We've got Giralyn P. Adalia, the accused, and she's hit with a heavy charge. Infanticide. That's under Article 255 of our revised penal code for those keeping track. The alleged incident, happened around July 17, 2010 in Sitio Arabe, Barangay Mayabon, in Zamboanguita, Negros Oriental. It's a mouthful, I know. Now, the prosecution, they're saying that after she gave birth to a baby girl, a live baby girl, Adalia took the baby and threw her into Arabi Creek, and the intention, they say, was to kill the baby by drowning her.
And then a few days later, on the morning of July 20th, 2010, they find the baby's body. That discovery was like a game changer. The umbilical cord and placenta, they were still attached. That gave the medical examiner a huge clue, like screaming that this baby had just been born.
So when they formally charged Adalia, she pleaded not guilty. And during the trial, the prosecution brought in a bunch of witnesses: Lorna Maruya, Esterlito Obera, Angelita Peltinca, Juanita Paclorin, even a police officer, PO3 Paquito Diaz. There was also Ronnie Japan, Cornelia Sammy, and Dr. Dilia Fudalan. But here's the thing, and it's a big thing. The defense, they didn't call any witnesses. No witnesses at all. And they didn't present any documents either to, like, fight the prosecution's case.
Yeah, that's always interesting. I mean, not having a defense doesn't mean she's guilty automatically, right? But it does leave the prosecution's story standing there, unchallenged. Makes their evidence seem even more important.
Right. So what did the lower courts think about over this? The regional trial court, the one in Dumaguete City, made its decision on February 23, 2016. They decided Giralyn P. Adalia was guilty. Guilty of infanticide beyond a reasonable doubt. And the sentence: Reclusion Perpetua. That's life imprisonment. At first, they even mentioned the death penalty, but then they changed it to life imprisonment because, well, the death penalty's been abolished.
The trial court, their reasoning was all about the circumstantial evidence. They knew there wasn't someone who actually saw Adalia throw the baby into the creek, but they looked at all the pieces: Adalia being pregnant, what happened during the birth, and what she did afterward. They connected all those dots. And in their minds, it all pointed to her being guilty.
And the case didn't stop there. It went up to the Court of Appeals, and they came out with their decision on July 6, 2017. They agreed with the trial court guilty. But they made a couple of changes. They said Adalia wouldn't be eligible for parole, under Republic Act number 9346. And they also told her to pay damages.
The Court of Appeals, they were totally on board with using circumstantial evidence. They were like, just because no one saw it happen doesn't mean she's innocent. They felt that the prosecution built a really strong case based on all this indirect evidence. And it led to, well, only one conclusion: Adalia did it. Oh, and Dr. Fudalan's findings, she examined the baby. Her findings really helped to back up the whole timeline.
And then the big leagues, the Supreme Court. The big question they had to answer was, did the Court of Appeals mess up by saying guilty based only on circumstantial evidence, especially when no one saw the infanticide happen? I mean, that's a big deal, right? Can we really lock someone up based on what we think happened, not what we actually saw?
Exactly. It goes to the heart of how our legal system works, how we prove things. Can we really take away someone's freedom, like forever, based on clues and guesses? The Supreme Court had a lot to think about.
They did, and on January 22, 2020, they made their decision. The case, People of the Philippines, Plaintiff Appellee versus Giralyn P. Adalia, accused appellant with the case number GR number 235990. Justice Lazaro Javier wrote the decision. And the Supreme Court, well, they agreed with the Court of Appeals. Adalia was still guilty. They did make some changes to how much she had to pay in damages, though.
The Supreme Court, they didn't just say guilty. They laid out the rules, like when could you use circumstantial evidence to convict someone. They said there has to be more than just one clue, right? And the facts behind those clues, Those have to be proven, solid. And when you put all those clues together, it has to be so clear that a judge, a fair judge, would say, yep, no doubt, guilty.
So they looked at Adalia's case with this, checklist. And the prosecution, they had a lot of evidence. First, a ton of people said, yeah, Adalia was pregnant. From October 2009 all the way to July 2010, when the baby was born, Dr. Futalan, she examined Adalia, and neighbors Juanilla Paclarin, Lorna Maruya, Estelita Obera, Angelita Peltinka, they all saw her belly growing. Some even heard Adalia say she was pregnant.
The next big thing they had to prove was, did Adalia actually give birth around July 17, 2010? And they had witnesses for that too. Lorna Maruya talked about things Adalia's mom said, and even Adalia admitted to giving birth. Then you have Estelita Obera and Ronnie Japan. They said they heard a baby crying in that shanty where Adalia was staying. And get this, Angelita Peltenki saw Adalia and her mom leaving the shanty, and she said Adalia looked weak, and her belly was way smaller. While the Paclarin, she noticed the smaller belly too. Oh, and Cornelia Sammy, she took Adalia and her mom to the health center because Adalia was bleeding, probably after giving birth. And when Dr. Futalan checked Adalia, yep, it all matched up with a recent birth.
The last piece of the puzzle, and the most serious one, was showing that Adalia was responsible for the baby's death. And for this, they had a few things. Police officer Diaz, he found the baby's body in the creek. Estelita Obera, she recognized the baby. And Dr. Futalan, when she examined the baby, she said it was fully developed, placenta and umbilical cord still there, which meant it was born alive. And this is where it gets really unsettling. Lorna Maria said she heard Adalia talking about wanting to strangle the baby because she thought there was an evil spirit involved. The Supreme Court, they paid attention to how Adalia and her mom reacted when the neighbors started asking questions. They saw that as more evidence, even if it was indirect.
Oh, and remember how Adalia didn't want them to assume the body? They were going to do a DNA test, and then the body just disappeared before they could do it? The Supreme Court, they were suspicious. They thought if she was innocent, wouldn't she want the test to prove it?
Now, Adalia's lawyers, they tried to argue for a lighter sentence. They said maybe she did it to hide her, her dishonor. But the Supreme Court shut that down. They said, where's the proof? You need evidence to back that up. For a lighter sentence in infanticide cases, that motive has to be clear.
And finally, about the money Adalia had to pay. The Supreme Court, they looked at another case, People versus Sugeta, and they adjusted the amounts based on that. So civil indemnity, moral damages, and exemplary damages, those were all set at P75,000 each. Temporary damages stayed at P50,000, and they added a 6% interest on all that, starting from when the decision becomes final.
So we've got this whole case built on connecting the dots on clues and inferences. What does that tell us about, about how hard it is to find the truth in these really personal, private situations when no one actually saw what happened?
It's like a huge challenge for the law. How do you balance getting justice with the fact that you're relying on indirect evidence? It makes you think about how we judge people's actions and words, especially within their culture and their community. It's complicated.
We really want to hear what you guys think. Do you agree with the Supreme Court using circumstantial evidence to decide this case? Hit us up in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you found this deep dive into the Adalia case interesting, well, hit that favorite button. Let us know you're out there.
Before we wrap up, it might help to break down some of the legal stuff in this case.
Yeah, good idea. Let's start with circumstantial evidence. The Supreme Court said it's all about those facts and circumstances that, when you put them together, can lead to a pretty solid conclusion about whether the accused is guilty. But there have to be multiple clues, right? Not just one. And those clues, the facts behind them, those have to be proven. And all those clues together, they got to point to guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. No other explanation makes sense.
Then there's infanticide. That's straight from Article 255 of the Revised Penal Code. It's specifically about killing a baby less than 3 days old. And the punishment is usually the same as for parricide or murder, which is heavy stuff. But there's this one part of the law that says if the mother did it to hide her, to protect her honor, then the sentence can be lighter. But, like we saw in Adalia's case, you need solid evidence to prove that was her reason.
Last but not least, we got to talk about factual findings of trial courts. The higher courts, the Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court, they generally go with what the trial court decided about the facts of the case. They trust that the trial court judge, who saw the witnesses and heard them talk, got it right. So unless there's something really big that the trial court missed, the higher courts usually stick with their findings, especially when it comes to believing the witnesses.
All these legal principles, they were like the guidebook for the courts in the Adalia case. They used them to understand the evidence, and that's how they ended up upholding the conviction.
If you're into exploring these big, important Philippine legal cases and really digging into what they mean, well, you got to subscribe to the deep dive. Hit that subscribe button and you'll never miss our deep dive.